So you wanted a reality check on the U.S. economy before Election Day, huh?
Yeah, kind of a gut check before you head to the polls.
You got it.
All right.
You sent us a bunch of articles from CBS News all about the economy. And honestly, it's
It's kind of weird, right?
yeah, it's like this weird disconnect between what we're seeing in the economic data and then what like everyone's actually experiencing every day.
Yeah, it's like this big head scratcher. You've got economists doing cartwheels, saying the economy is basically crushing it right now.
Right, they're like giving it an A+, like top marks across the board.
Exactly. But then you talk to your neighbor or like go to the grocery store and it feels like, I don't know.
Like we're headed straight for a recession.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, let's like break this down a little.
Yeah.
So these CBS articles, they do mention some, really positive indicators. We're talking like strong GDP growth, unemployment's down.
Yeah.
Even inflation seems to be like finally maybe
Cooling off. Yeah.
cooling off a little bit.
Yeah. And we're not talking about like your uncle who dabbles in stocks. Like these are big time economists.
Right.
Mark Zandi, he's the chief economist over at Moody's Analytics. He's advised like both Democrats and Republicans.
Okay, so he's not exactly partisan.
Not at all. And even he said something like he's rarely seen an economy performing as well as this one in his entire career. And he's been doing this for like 35 years or something.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty serious endorsement.
Right.
So then we get to the public opinion polls, and it's kind of like everyone forgot to show up to the economic victory party,
Yeah, it's like everyone got the invitation, but nobody came.
Right.
And CBS News, they do a lot of polling, and they found that a full 60% of Americans, they say the economy is either fairly bad or very bad right now.
Oof, yeah, that's rough.
And here's the even crazier part. 52%, so more than half, they say that they are worse off financially than they were just 4 years ago.
Which, honestly, like, that probably resonates with a lot of you listening right now. So, I mean, how do we square these two things? How do we square the economists popping champagne with so many Americans feeling like, I don't know.
Like they're getting squeezed.
Squeezed, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the deal here?
Well, I think a big part of it is just like what each group is focusing on. Economists, they love to like zoom out and look at the really big picture, right? So they're looking at GDP, CPI, all those kinds of big, broad measures.
Right.
And by those measures, things aren't actually like terrible.
Okay.
But those numbers don't always capture what's happening when you're sitting at your kitchen table trying to figure out how to afford like groceries and stuff.
Oh, tell me about it. Like, those grocery bills are no joke these days. And the articles actually had some really eye-opening examples about this. Like, did you see the part about how grocery prices are a full 26% higher now than they were back in early 2020?
Oof. Yeah, 26%.
Which, I mean, that's not ancient history.
No, not at all.
That's like very much on people's minds still.
Absolutely. And groceries are just one piece of the puzzle, right? I mean, think about housing costs.
Oh, don't even get me started on housing costs.
Or interest rates. Like all those everyday expenses have just like shot up for so many people.
Right.
So yeah, maybe inflation is technically cooling off, like the economists keep saying.
Right.
But those prices haven't like magically gone back down to where they were before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, even if things aren't getting worse, they're not exactly getting a whole lot better either,
Exactly.
And that probably leaves a lot of people feeling like, their paychecks are just getting stretched thinner and thinner.
Absolutely.
It's like that saying, one person's cooling down is another person still on fire.
100%.
And that kind of leads us to this this interesting little economic tool, I guess you'd call it, called the misery index. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah, the misery index. It's kind of like, taking the temperature of the economy.
Okay, I like that. So, like, how does it work? Is it some big, complicated formula? Or is it something I could, like, figure out on the back of a napkin?
Oh, no, you definitely don't need, like, a PhD in economics to calculate this one.
Yeah.
Basically, you just take the unemployment rate, whatever that is at the time, and you add it to the inflation rate.
Okay.
And that's it. That's your misery index.
So the higher the number, the more miserable people are.
Exactly. Pretty straightforward.
Makes sense. So where does the U.S. stand right now? Are we talking, like, DEFCON 1 levels of economic misery?
Okay, so get this. The current misery index, it's actually below the average we've seen since like 1947. So not exactly a 5-alarm fire.
Okay, well, that's maybe a little reassuring.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're about to tell me why it's not quite that simple.
Well, you always do this to me. You always see right through me.
I know, I know.
Okay, so yeah, the misery index, it can be useful. Like it's a good kind of a snapshot of how things are going. But like most snapshots, it doesn't always tell the whole story.
There's always more going on. So, for one thing, the misery index, it doesn't factor in those super high interest rates that we were talking about before.
Oh, right.
And it's definitely a form of economic misery for a lot of people.
Totally.
Especially if you're like trying to buy a house or if you're trying to refinance your mortgage right now.
Yeah.
Oof, forget about it. But the thing is, that pain, it's not captured in the misery index at all.
Interesting. That's a really good point. It's like, yeah, maybe you're not like drowning, but you're definitely having to swim really hard just to stay afloat,
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of swimming hard, the articles also talked about how a lot of people aren't just like trying to keep their own heads above water financially. They're also dealing with all these other obligations like,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, think about the cost of college now.
oh my gosh, college.
It's insane.
It's like a whole other mortgage. Right. So parents are like shelling out these insane amounts of money for tuition. And then a lot of young people, they're starting their adult lives already like tens of thousands of dollars in debt.
Coolly.
And that's a huge weight to carry around. It's a huge financial burden.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, you've got this whole thing with like parents having to financially support their adult children.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which, by the way, I was like blown away when I saw this statistic. The articles mentioned a study that found parents are giving an average of, get this, $1,384 per month
Oh, wow.
to their adult kids.
That's a lot of money.
It's a ton of money.
Yeah.
Especially, month after month, year after year.
Right. And the thing that really got me about that study was that $3,384, that's actually more than double what the average working parent is putting towards their own retirement.
Wow. That's kind of terrifying, honestly.
It is.
Because it's not just about making ends meet this month, right? It's about like the long game.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having that financial security, down the road. And it seems like a lot of people are having to choose between like helping their kids and saving for their own futures.
Absolutely. And, all of this, it just adds this layer of stress, like this underlying feeling of financial insecurity that's hard to like put your finger on, but it's definitely there for a lot of people.
Totally. Like this feeling that the rug could be pulled out from under you at any moment.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if maybe our economic indicators, like the ones we're using now, need like an update.
Right.
Like maybe we need a like sandwich generation stress level index.
Yes.
Or like a cost of launching your kid into adulthood index or something.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, something that actually measures what matters,
Right, exactly.
And speaking of things that matter, there's this whole other layer to this whole perception puzzle that I found super interesting. It seems like your politics, even your education level, can totally color how you see the economy.
So you're saying our own biases might be influencing how we're feeling about all this. Okay, tell me more. I'm very curious about this.
Well, so the CBS News polling, it found a huge difference in how Republicans and Democrats view the economy. Like, Republicans are way more likely to say that the economy is doing badly, even when you show them the data that says, hey, look, it's actually doing okay.
So even when they're looking at the same, like, supposedly good economic news, Republicans are seeing doom and gloom, and Democrats are, like, breaking out the party hats.
Basically, yeah. It's wild. Remember Zandy, the economist we were talking about before? He even said something like, if you ask a Republican about the economy, it doesn't even matter what you say, they just don't think it's good.
Wow.
And the polls back that up. Like almost 90%, 90, of conservatives said they thought the economy was doing badly, but only 30% of liberals said the same.
Wow. Okay, so that's a huge difference. What's the deal there? Is that just like political posturing, or is there something more to it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure, but it could be a distrust of the data, right? Like maybe they don't trust the sources, think they're biased or something.
Yeah.
Or it could be that they just have different priorities. Like maybe conservatives are more worried about things like government spending or the national debt.
Right.
Which, those things aren't always reflected in those like big picture metrics like GDP growth.
That's true. That's a good point. So it's not just about the numbers themselves. It's about like what those numbers represent to different people.
Exactly.
And actually the articles, they pointed out another really interesting trend. They were saying that there's a big education divide when it comes to like how optimistic or pessimistic people are about the economy.
Oh, yeah, For sure. People without a college degree, they tend to be way more negative about the economy than people with a degree.
Yeah, which, I mean, sadly, it makes a lot of sense when you consider how the economy has been treating people the last, like, few decades.
Totally.
It's like, we all know that wages for workers without a college degree, they've been, like, flatlining for years, while people with a degree, their incomes have, continued to go up.
Yep.
And that gap is even bigger for, like, young men without a degree.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The article said they're actually earning 22% less than, like, their dads did back in 1973.
It's crazy.
It's kind of mind-blowing.
It's a big deal. And it shows that, even if the economy is doing well by some measures, those benefits aren't being shared equally, like not even close.
Yeah, totally. And when you factor in the rising cost of, like, everything, groceries, housing, you name it, those price hikes are going to hit people without a college degree even harder, right?
100%. Because if, like, a bigger chunk of your income is going towards, like, just the basics, the essentials, then those price increases are going to take a much bigger bite out of your budget.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, like, a recession is when your neighbor loses their job, but a depression is when you lose yours.
Like, yeah, the economy might look great from, like, 30,000 feet. But a lot of people are down here on the ground, and they're, like, not feeling so great about it.
Totally. And it's not just about, like, the material stuff either, right?
No.
There's also this feeling of financial insecurity that's hard to measure,
Totally.
But it's very real for a lot of Americans.
Yeah, like younger generations worried about being able to buy a house, weighed down by student loan debt. Older generations wondering if they'll ever be able to retire.
Exactly. It all adds up to this feeling of, like, what if? Like, what if things fall apart?
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially when you hear about, like, the stock market hitting record highs. But you realize that only a tiny percentage of Americans actually own enough stock to, like, benefit from that.
For sure. And it kind of brings us back to that question we were talking about before. Like, okay, maybe the economy is doing great according to some people, but, like, where's all that prosperity going?
Right. Where is it going?
Yeah. Well, I think you've given us a lot to think about, especially as we head into this election. Like, it's not enough to just, like, glance at those top line numbers,
No.
We have to think about what those numbers actually mean for, like, real people's lives.
100%.
Well, awesome. This has been really eye-opening. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the U.S. economy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us too. And remember, keep asking those questions and keep an open mind. We'll see you next time.